Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and today I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm actually going to be getting into a matter that's more involved with local and state politics rather than federal politics. This is a nice little article from the Associated Press, and I have a link in the description that will take you directly to the Morning Call, which is a local paper in my area. This has to do with the ongoing feud over state dog laws, and specifically the laws concerning breeders, namely those who are private independent breeders as opposed to pet store owners and animal shelters, which have very little, if any, oversight whatsoever. The title to this is Dog Board Growling Over Lack of Funding. And the irony is so juicy that I may not be able to contain myself from laughing at some of the stuff in this article, so just watch out for that. It's the first time the group has met since Corbett took office, and the Agricultural Department states, "We're not trying to hide anything." Well, let's find out about that now, shall we? An advisory panel on Pennsylvania's dog law zeroed in Wednesday on how state government handles dog licenses, deals with animal shelters, and enforces the law that was considered among the toughest in the nation when it went into effect in 2009. Members of the Dog Law Advisory Board expressed frustration during a meeting at the Agriculture Department's headquarters in Harrisburg. It was the first time the board had met since Governor Corbett took office at the start of last year. Executive Deputy Secretary Michael Pechert told members the department was not trying to hide anything and noted the law has led to a drop in the number of commercial breeding kennels in the state to 52 from more than 300. Now, just for everybody's reckoning right now, in order to qualify for being a commercial kennel under the new laws, which were passed in late 2009, you need only sell 60 or more puppies in a year. So if you have 15 active females, you breed them once a year, and they have 4 or more puppies in each litter, you're considered commercial, even though you have no more dogs actively breeding than certain hobby breeders tend to have. That was a very drastic change from the old standard for commercial licenses, where you were only considered commercial if you sold to wholesalers and pet stores, which is usually something reserved for mills and for people that have hundreds upon hundreds of dogs in a small location. So in addition to all of these supposed mills being put out of business, a lot of smaller to middle-sized breeders were also put out of business. Let's just put it that way. So the damage is actually even worse than what I just read in that particular paragraph. Now, continuing. There is no intention in this office or this department to do anything other than to enforce the law, Pechert said. It has been quite a task to get educated. He and other agriculture officers at the meeting said the law has been in many respects a challenge, and they are working on a handbook to guide employees of the State Office of Dog Law Enforcement. Pechert said dog wardens pick up 8,000 to 13,000 strays annually, but with counties and shelters facing financial problems of their own, they are increasingly asking the state to handle their strays. We're finding more and more problems every day in finding a place for stray dogs. Key provisions of the law that went into effect in October 2009 require large-scale breeders to double. Now, remember what I said before. Large-scale is anybody who breeds and sells 60 puppies or more a year. So those of you who have it in your head that, somebody's got hundreds or even thousands of dogs locked up in a huge warehouse, this is not what they're talking about. Most of those people aren't even registered. Continuing. Eliminate wire flooring and provide unfettered access to the outdoors. The new law also banned cage stacking, instituted twice-a-year vet checks, and mandated new ventilation and cleanliness standards. Now let me stop right there. Let me give you an idea of what the new law instituted as far as ventilation and cleanliness standards. Under the new law, the kennel that my family owns had to purchase 4 25,000 BTU air conditioners and had to put exhaust fans in 4 separate rooms basically to provide cross ventilation. A room of comparable size to our kennel having that many air conditioners is something that is normally found in a smoking lounge that accommodates about 180 people. We actually got some exemptions under these standards, primarily because with air velocity being that ridiculously high, the amount of communicable bacteria being brought into the kennel via all of the airflow 24/7 would be so ridiculously high that, you know, our employees would probably get sick. I mean, it's that bad. And there's other things too. The cage stacking thing, I understand. We've never done that. Twice a year vet checks, we were doing that long before this law was passed. Most of this stuff is common sense, but the ventilation standards were ridiculous. And the unfettered access to the outdoors thing is also ridiculous also, because basically what they're saying is that it's not enough that the dogs have 10 or 12 hours access to the outside during the day. They have to be able to go outside anytime they please, 24/7, even if the temperature is 12 degrees below zero, which makes heating the entire kennel a real challenge. Let me just say that right now. The setup that they were asking for is basically exactly the setup that most ASPCA locations have. And for anybody who's been there, you know that those places stink to high heaven because the setup makes it very difficult to keep the places clean. Ammonia content is through the roofs. It's not exactly an ideal situation for a dog to be in, but that's usually the best they can hope for if they're a stray or if they've been abandoned. And note this also, ASPCA buildings are not subject to the ventilation standards that I just listed earlier. They're exempt from that, and oftentimes they're exempt from inspection also. Continuing. State officials said kennel inspection reports were posted online in recent days, responding to a complaint voiced by several people at the meeting. Board members asked how the regulations are being enforced and why the agency's budget overlook has darkened. State officials said 90% of the office's restricted account consists of revenue from dog licenses sold through county treasurers, but that income has been hit hard by the growing use of one-time lifetime licenses. Only 16 commercial kennels were inspected in 2011 after July 1st, according to an online department database. 6 of them were closing inspections, so there was no need to comply with the regulations. 8 other kennels had waivers, so they too had no need to comply. The other 2 were inspected because of violations unrelated to the new kennel regulations. Board members asked about how ventilation rules are enforced without the use of instruments to measure air quality and other enforcement issues. Let me ask all of you on the board a question. How are they supposed to afford to buy these instruments in order to do this when they have no revenue because almost all of the kennels in the state have been shut down? Nobody's buying licenses. Fewer people are paying sales tax for the sale of dogs. So, I mean, you've got nothing to work with, and it's your own damn fault. Continuing. Petschert said the agency would review that issue, which means they're not going to do anything about it. And a subcommittee was established to examine enforcement in general. That's what they always do. They appoint a subcommittee. They don't do anything. They just appoint a subcommittee. The committee gets paid to talk about nonsense that's never going to get to be enforced. And they wonder why there's no money to pay dog wardens to actually inspect places. Continuing. Subcommittees were also set up to look at dog licenses and sheltering. The Dog Law Advisory Board makes non-binding recommendations to the Agriculture Department, and that ends the article. I'm just going to tell all of you something right now. When you start treating law-abiding businessmen as criminals, the only thing you're going to be left with is criminals filling the void of the absences that you've created in that market. These laws which have been passed are so ridiculously conceived, nobody can follow them. That's why all of these kennels have these waivers. We have a waiver too on the unfettered access part. What this law will do, it has accomplished its first intended goal, in my opinion already, which was to completely destroy, private kennels in this state, with a few exceptions. The second goal which was an unintended consequence of this, it has dried revenue up to the point that they don't have enough enforcement people. They can't pay people to go out and actually do these inspections. Fewer enforcement people in the Department of Agriculture means you're going to see an increase in illegal activity, namely puppy mills and other various kennels with much worse conditions than what were being dealt with before this law was passed. There is going to be a boom in black market dog sales. And these dogs will be sold at a much cheaper price because these dogs will not have with them the required costs in order to upkeep the situation that they are living in and to be properly looked after by vets and vaccinated. This has accomplished the exact opposite of what it was intended to. There were people throughout the state who said that this was a bad idea, but it was written into law anyway because the Democrats had control of both houses, and the former governor of the state, Fast Eddie Randell, in my opinion, this is a rumor, but I think this makes perfect sense, was probably fucking one of the people in the ASPCA that wanted this law passed so that they'd have more business by taking in more stray dogs or more abandoned dogs because of the lack of breeders to actually sell dogs legitimately, and all of these mill dogs being socially dysfunctional, being abandoned by owners. That's the long and short of it. This is yet another example of statist idiocy producing exactly what it intends not to create: more lawlessness and lower quality of life for everybody, people and dogs. It's been pretty well researched that owning a pet is actually a good reliever of stress and a good way to increase quality of life. And with a lack of quality pets to be owned by people, you will see a decrease in quality of life and an increase in stress in the state of Pennsylvania. And with that, you'll see more out-of-state commerce, and you might see more other unintended consequences, such as more people being pissed off behind the wheel and running their car into somebody else's or something else of that nature. I mean, anything's possible at this point. So, for all of you that managed to sit through this, you can feel free to read the article for yourself, even though I basically read the whole thing. And if you want to, you can sign up on the morning call and you can comment on this, and you can let the people who are currently running the state government here, you can just let them know that you think they're a bunch of retards, because that's what I think they are. Until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.